Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker says he's getting his state ready in case the federal government defaults on its debt. Megan Hughes caught up with Walker. They talked about the deficit debate as well as special elections that could tip the balance of power in Wisconsin to Democrats. But she started by asking Walker what he's doing to protect the state if a deal on the debt ceiling isn't reached.
We literally just last week started looking at all the different options. We had our Secretary of Administration go through everything from Health and Human Services, transportation. A lot of the federal dollars that go into interstate work all could be up in the air. And so we decided not to wait a week or two until after it might have happened, but instead start planning. But for us, there's the spending issue, but there's also the same issues when it comes to both state and municipal bonds. That is an impact. And probably the worst part is what it means to the economy. Wisconsin, like every other state across the country, is obviously dealing with a tough economy. Our unemployment rate's better than the national average by far, but still, the uncertainty that comes with the debt ceiling and the problems with that are causing problems with the economy.
There's also going to be a lot of news from your state this week on the state recall elections. Do you see these elections being a litmus test for your policy so far?
Well, yes and no. I mean, in a way, certainly the debate about them or about our policies. The big question mark is, and why in a way it reflects what happened earlier this year, we went in to solve our problems in Wisconsin, and we did. We took a $3.6 billion deficit, made it into a $300 million surplus, froze property taxes, and gave reforms to the local governments as well as state governments. So now school districts are talking about not only not laying off teachers, but actually in some cases adding more teachers, lowering classroom size, setting money aside for merit pay. Where it gets at with your question, though, is if the debate is about whether it's working or not and it's a level playing field, I think we win. The challenge is you've got national unions talking about spending upwards to $20–25 million. That is unprecedented for 9 legislative races for the state Senate. I spent $13 million for a gubernatorial race statewide. They're talking about $20 to $25 million. If we're outspent 2 to 1 in those races, who knows what'll happen.
I was actually in Madison, Wisconsin during some of those protests. You've taken a lot of heat for your position on collective bargaining. Specifically, I want to know, how can you quantify how much that's going to save the state?
Well, in our case, we know the changes that we couldn't get. For 8 years, I was a county elected official. I couldn't get any of these changes because of the collective bargaining law, which is not a right, it's an expensive entitlement. If it was a right, the federal government would have that right, and collective bargaining isn't in place for wages and benefits at the federal level under President Obama. But in terms of savings, because of the power we give now to local government as well as the state, over the next 2 years, we saved $1.44 billion compared to the change in state aid for state and local governments of $1.27 billion. So in the end, the savings are greater than the reductions in state aid. Had we not made those changes, those reforms that we put in place, there'd just be big cuts, and you'd see what you're seeing in other states. Illinois, for example, with massive tax increases, or places like Connecticut, where they've laid 5,500 employees off. In our case, our reforms allowed us to save middle-class jobs and protect middle-class property taxpayers.
Sticking with jobs, you've said in the past that you wanted to get some companies, lure some companies from Chicago, your neighbor to the south, and Illinois, right. The state of Illinois. How successful have you been there? Well,
it's a steady trend, and you're not going to pick up a major Fortune 500 company that's got infrastructure investments where they're not going to pick up and move, although, you know, we've reached out to Caterpillar, reached out to Sears, anybody else who's interested, but it's very difficult for a large company to move. We've had greater success as mid to small size companies, particularly manufacturers, but others who say, you know what, we're looking to grow, we're looking to expand, we need more space. We had a company, for example, not too long ago in Kenosha County, Catalyst Exhibits, who was looking to grow in the Chicago area, found an equivalent amount of space they were looking for just to the north in Kenosha County, and liked what we were doing. They liked how we showed that Wisconsin was open for business, not just in the sign, but in terms of lowering the tax burden for job creators, passing tort reform, regulatory reform, health savings accounts, things of that nature, versus in Illinois, the income tax went up 67%, the business tax went up 46%. That's a devastating contrast.